Let me tell you the truth, most people are too afraid to say out loud. If he stopped valuing you, it's because you trained him not to. But what if I told you there's one shift, a silent, almost invisible act that can flip the dynamic instantly? Try this one simple trick and you won't have to ask for his respect ever again. You see, when a person stops valuing you, it's rarely sudden. It's the slow erosion of self-worth, traded piece by piece for attention. You overgive, you overexplain, and you stay longer than your dignity allows. But there is a trick, not to manipulate him, but to reclaim yourself. Withdraw not your love, not your kindness. Withdraw your emotional availability. Detach from the outcome. Pull back your mental energy. Speak less. Respond slower. Smile smaller. And then watch. Because when the source of comfort becomes less predictable, interest ignites. When your presence becomes scarce, your value skyrockets. If any part of you is whispering, "This is exactly what I needed to hear," pause right now and take one action. Choose yourself today. Not tomorrow, not after another unanswered text. Now, when you shift your focus from proving your worth to knowing it, something magical happens. You become magnetic, not because you're chasing, but because you're standing still, radiating certainty. He will notice. He won't feel the pull. He will question what changed. But by then, the question isn't whether he values you. It's whether you still value him. And that is the power of walking away emotionally before you ever leave physically. This isn't about games, this is about gravity. You create it when you stop orbiting around someone who no longer sees your light. When a man no longer values you, your instinct might be to try harder, send longer messages, be more available, do more to prove your worth. But this is the very trap that cements your invisibility. The more emotional energy you give to someone who stopped appreciating it, the more power you hand over. This brings us to the real dynamic. Power always shifts with attention. In relationships, emotional attention is currency. Whoever holds it sets the pace. When you continue to pour love, validation, time, and care into someone who gives you breadcrumbs in return, you tip the scale so far that you become the one chasing. And the moment you're chasing, you're no longer valued. It starts small. Maybe he responds slower than usual, cancels plans more often, becomes vague in his words, and inconsistent in action. Instead of pulling back, you lean in. You ask what's wrong. You try to fix things. You make excuses for his behavior. But all that sends one clear signal. You have my full attention even when you treat me poorly. And when someone sees they don't need to work to keep you, your value in their eyes decreases. Not because you're less valuable, but because you're too available. There is no mystery, no tension, no challenge. You've made yourself predictable. And in the psychology of human desire, predictability breeds indifference. Now, reverse the dynamic. Pull your energy back. Not in anger, not in revenge, but in awareness. Stop over-communicating. Stop explaining. Stop being emotionally accessible on demand. When you remove your attention, you disrupt the pattern. You change the rhythm of the connection. Suddenly, the man who took your energy for granted senses the absence, not necessarily of you physically, but of your emotional presence. This can create a jolt because people notice energy before they notice words. He may not say it out loud, but internally the questions begin. Why has she gone quiet? Is she done with me? Did someone else catch her eye? This is the point where power begins to shift. You're no longer seeking, you're choosing. You've recentered yourself. Attention withdrawal doesn't mean you're cutting someone off entirely. It means you're reclaiming the energy you once gave so freely. That energy now returns to its rightful place, you. And as you reinvest it in your confidence, your presence, your growth, your value reemerges, not just to him, but most importantly, to yourself. The truth is, men respond not to pressure, but to space, not to constant presence, but to contrast. When he sees that your world doesn't revolve around him, he is forced to decide whether he wants to step up or step out. Either way, you win, because you've already done the most powerful thing possible. You've shifted the balance of power by withdrawing the very thing he stopped valuing, your attention. Self-worth is not something you earn from another person's approval. It is something you decide daily to protect. When a man stops valuing you, the temptation is to internalize it, to start wondering what you did wrong or what you need to change to win him back. But that reaction reveals something deeper, a belief that your value is negotiable. It's not. A woman who truly knows her worth doesn't crumble at the withdrawal of someone's attention. She observes, adjusts, and stands firm in who she is. You see, when someone stops treating you with respect, love, or care, your response says more about you than it does about them. If you tolerate it, make excuses for it, or try to fight for their validation, you're unknowingly signaling that your worth is flexible, that it depends on their behavior. But real power begins when you set a quiet, unwavering standard for how you expect to be treated. Not loudly, not dramatically, but consistent. That standard isn't meant to punish or manipulate. It's meant to protect your peace, your dignity, and your emotional health. The problem many people face is that they attach their value to being chosen. They believe that if someone picks them, loves them, prioritizes them, that must mean they're enough. But that belief places your entire self-esteem in someone else's hands. And the moment they withdraw, you're left feeling hollow, questioning your beauty, your intelligence, your worth. But someone else's inability to see your value does not reduce it. It simply reveals the lens through which they're looking, and often that lens is clouded by their own insecurities, fears, or emotional immaturity. When you begin to internalize your worth as fixed, unshakable, and non-negotiable, everything changes. You no longer beg for clarity. You no longer chase breadcrumbs. You no longer try to convince someone of your value because you know it like you know your own name. That kind of confidence creates a boundary that doesn't even need to be spoken. People feel it. They sense when you're not desperate for their attention, and that sense either draws them in or sends them away. Either result is a blessing. You teach people how to treat you not with your words, but with your energy, your presence, and your decisions. If a man disrespects your time and you still make yourself available, that teaches him something. If he speaks to you in a way that's dismissive and you don't respond or remove yourself, that teaches him something too. But if you walk away, not to provoke him, but to protect your peace, you shift the entire narrative. You become someone who is unshakable in her standards and unaffected by temporary validation. Your worth remains intact no matter how anyone else sees you. The law of scarcity is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. When something is rare, limited, or hard to access, we instinctively assign it more value. It's not manipulation, it's nature. The same rule applies in relationships. When a person is always available, constantly reachable, emotionally wide open without boundaries, the other person begins to take that presence for granted. It's not necessarily because they're cruel or ungrateful, it's because the human mind is wired to devalue what it doesn't have to work for. In the beginning of a relationship, there's excitement, uncertainty, and curiosity, but over time, as routines form and availability becomes predictable, that spark can fade. Not because the connection isn't real, but because the thrill of earning it disappears. When you are always emotionally accessible, always saying yes, always responding quickly, always proving yourself, you erase the very tension that keeps desire alive. You remove the chase, the wonder, the question marks. And without those, value can quietly erode. What was once a treasure becomes expected. What was once appreciated becomes assumed. But when you shift, when you stop offering yourself on demand, when you stop making your time, energy, and emotional support a given, you reintroduce scarcity. You become less predictable. Your presence begins to feel more intentional, more deliberate, and therefore more precious. Not because you're playing games, but because you are recognizing your own worth and choosing not to give it away without discernment. That shift alone makes people stop and take notice. Scarcity isn't about withholding love or being cold. It's about creating space. It's about allowing someone to feel your absence enough to remember your value. People need contrast to appreciate what they have. Constant presence creates numbness. Occasional absence creates reflection. It gives the other person time to realize what they might be losing, to question their role in the dynamic, and to feel the weight of your absence. That space can be more powerful than any argument, explanation, or confrontation. It also reframes your energy. Instead of constantly proving your worth, you're allowing your worth to be felt through distance. You stop trying to convince someone to see you and instead let them sit with what it feels like not to have you so readily. That's the real power of scarcity. It reclaims your dignity without a single word. It forces the other person to confront a truth, that your presence is not a guarantee, and if they don't value it, they might lose it. People chase what they fear they can't fully possess. They appreciate what feels selective, and they elevate what isn't easily given. By making yourself scarce, not as a tactic, but as a reflection of self-respect, you reestablish your value without chasing validation. You let your absence speak the truth your words no longer need to say. Energy speaks louder than words. In every interaction, people are reading your tone, your posture, your eyes, your presence, long before they hear a single sentence. You can say I'm fine 100 times, but if your energy says you're hurt, desperate, or insecure, that message comes through louder. The truth is, we don't respond to language first. We respond to frequency, vibe, presence, and when a man no longer values you, it often has less to do with what you say and more to do with the energy you project. You might think you're doing everything right, being kind, patient, loving, available, but if the energy behind those actions is coming from fear of losing him or a deep desire to be validated, that energy will create resistance. It may seem unfair, but people feel when you're giving from emptiness. They sense when your love is a transaction. They know when your attention is rooted in need rather than confidence. And as much as they might not say it, they start to pull away from that energy. It doesn't feel light. It doesn't feel magnetic. It feels heavy. It feels like pressure. But when your energy shifts, when it comes from calm, from certainty, from deep inner knowing, you don't have to raise your voice or explain yourself repeatedly. The room feels you. The man you're dealing with feels the difference. Your presence becomes a mirror that reflects how someone is treating you. You stop overposing, you stop overreacting, you become still, and in that stillness is strength. Not the kind of strength that tries to prove anything, but the kind that says, I know who I am, and I will not beg you to see it. That kind of energy doesn't chase, it doesn't plead, it doesn't overextend. It simply exists in full awareness of its worth. And when you operate from that place, people begin to realign their behavior toward you. Consciously or not, you're no longer vibrating at the frequency of desperation. You're vibrating at the frequency of peace. And peace is powerful. There's also a shift in how you interpret things. When your energy is right, you don't take every delay or every silence as rejection. You don't spiral into anxiety when someone doesn't respond. You observe, you assess, and you make decisions based on clarity, not fear. That's when true power emerges, not from controlling someone else's actions, but from mastering your own emotional energy. When your energy says, I know my worth, people who want to remain in your life must rise to that frequency. Words can lie, performances can fool, but energy always tells the truth. When a man senses that your love is no longer rooted in fear of abandonment, but in alignment with self-respect, the dynamic shifts. Either he rises or he leaves. Either way, your energy remains unmoved, steady, and fully grounded in your own power. Silence is often misunderstood. People see it as emptiness, absence, or avoidance. But silence, when used with intention, is one of the most powerful forms of communication. It creates space, and in that space, everything unspoken becomes louder. When a man no longer values you, your instinct may be to talk more, explain how you feel, demand clarity, express your pain in hopes that he will finally understand. But often words fall on deaf ears when someone has already started to emotionally detach. That's when silence becomes your greatest strength. Silence doesn't mean passive aggression or manipulation. It's not the act of pouting or punishing someone by withholding communication. True silence is calm. It's deliberate. It's the space between reaction and response, between chaos and clarity. When you stop explaining yourself, stop begging to be seen, and stop trying to prove your worth, you give both yourself and the other person a moment to face the truth without distraction. In silence, a man is left with his own thoughts. Without your constant presence filling every gap, he's forced to feel the weight of your absence. That absence can echo louder than any argument. It creates a void, and the human mind is uncomfortable with voids. It seeks to fill them. When you step back and become quiet, not out of spite, but out of self-respect, the dynamic shifts. The energy you once gave freely now returns to you. And in that withdrawal, you stop pouring into someone who has stopped appreciating it. More importantly, silence gives you the chance to hear yourself. When you're constantly reacting, constantly speaking, constantly trying to fix a situation, you drown out your own inner voice. But in stillness, truth surfaces. You start to see things as they are, not as you wish them to be. You notice patterns, behaviors, and emotional signals you might have ignored before. Silence is a mirror, and it reflects not just the other person's actions, but your own needs and boundaries. It also triggers curiosity. When someone is used to your emotional availability, your quick responses, your constant presence, and suddenly you go quiet, it disrupts the pattern. That disruption forces reflection. They begin to wonder what changed. They start to question whether you've moved on emotionally. That subtle shift creates tension, the kind that stirs awareness even if they don't immediately act on it. Silence doesn't chase. It doesn't beg. It doesn't announce its exit. It simply allows time to reveal what words can't. If he truly values you, silence will bring him face to face with that realization. If he doesn't, silence will expose that too, and it will do so without you needing to waste another breath. That's the beauty of it. It protects your dignity while delivering the message, I will not argue for a seat at a table I built. It allows you to maintain your power without forcing an outcome. You are the prize, not because you're perfect or because you have to prove it, but because your presence, your love, your energy, your attention, and your time are valuable. When a man stops valuing you, it's often because you forgot your position. You started acting like you had to win him over, as if you were auditioning for a role in his life. You began to shrink, to bend, to overcompensate. You traded your throne for a seat in the audience, watching him decide if you were worthy. But the moment you start acting like you're not the prize, the world follows suit. Being the prize isn't about ego or arrogance. It's about knowing what you bring to the table and refusing to beg anyone to sit with you. It's about understanding that your value does not increase or decrease based on someone else's ability to recognize it. Some people are simply not ready to receive what you offer. Others will only realize what you are worth after they no longer have access to you. But none of that changes your essence. A diamond doesn't lose its value just because someone mistook it for glass. When you carry yourself like the prize, your actions reflect it. You don't chase. You don't settle for inconsistency. You don't make excuses for disrespect. You don't try to decode mixed signals or justify poor behavior. Instead, you observe, you choose, you move accordingly. And that energy alone makes people pay attention. Because the truth is, most people are used to being pursued. They expect effort from the other side while giving the bare minimum in return. But when someone encounters a woman who knows she's the prize, they're either inspired to rise to her level or they fall away, intimidated by her standard. A man who truly values you won't be confused by your worth. He won't make you question your place in his life. But until that man shows up, you must hold your own standard with unwavering commitment. It is not your job to convince someone to treat you right. It is your job to decide that you will not stay where you are not seen, not honored, not respected. You lead with self-worth, and you let that be the filter for who stays and who goes. Many women lower their standards because they're afraid of being alone. But when you believe you are the prize, you know that solitude is far better than being undervalued in someone else's presence. You stop fearing the silence. You stop fearing the waiting. You know that what's meant for you will never require you to abandon yourself. So you hold your head high, Not because you're trying to prove something, but because you've remembered who you are. And from that place, everything changes. People treat you differently, energy around you shifts, and the world reflects back the value you finally decided to claim for yourself. So here's the truth. When a man no longer values you, the answer isn't to try harder, love louder, or shrink smaller. The answer is to return to yourself. Withdraw your energy, stand in your worth, create silence, and remember who the prize is. You don't need to convince anyone to see your value. You need to believe it so deeply that anyone who doesn't recognize it becomes irrelevant. When your energy says, I know who I am, the game shifts. Some will rise to meet you, others will fall away, but you will always remain centered, unshaken, and in full command of your power. Let them wonder. Let them feel the loss. Let them face the silence. Because the moment you stop chasing and start choosing, everything changes. That's not revenge, that's alignment.